This week, Blair Jenkins, a former head of news here at BBC Scotland, was named the chief executive of the Yes Scotland group, which is running the official campaign to gain independence. And he's here now. Thanks very much indeed for coming in, Blair. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
But if we start with the already concern that other pro-independence parties have had, that the SNP will steamroller this whole campaign, how do you stop it, if you want to stop it, just being a SNP campaign?
This is going to be a very big umbrella campaign. The Yes Scotland campaign is for everybody in Scotland, from wherever they come on the political spectrum, from all parties or from no parties, to get together and fight on this one issue, which I think is just a hugely important issue. So while the SNP, of course, as one would expect, will be very active in the campaign, and a lot of SNP people will be prominent in it, it will be a much, much bigger and broader alliance.
Where then does the funding come from for this? How much of the funding, if we do just at the practicalities, will come from the SNP? And if it's a lot of funding, isn't there then going to be the perception that you're under pressure to meet the SNP's agenda if they're bankrolling it, essentially?
I think it's been said already that the funding for the launch of Yes Scotland came partly from the money that was given by the late Macker, Eddie Morgan, and from the Weirs. So that some of their funding has been used in the launch period. But I'm very clear, I'm absolutely determined that the vast majority of the money that Yes Scotland raises will be directly raised by the campaign itself. Right. So Yes Scotland will be self-financing over the course of the campaign.
But you have a limit on the amount that people who are not on the electoral roll in Scotland can donate. Why was that decision taken? How much is it and why was that decision taken? I
think it's very important. I mean, there is evidence to suggest that most people in Scotland do feel quite strongly that the referendum campaign should be determined by the people who live in Scotland and who are going to make this decision. So what we said was that we will not accept donations above £500 from anyone who is not a voter, who is not on the electoral register in Scotland. And I think that's a very important thing in terms of making sure that it's the people who are taking the decision in Scotland who are contributing to the campaign.
So it would be a tactical error if the Better Together campaign were bankrolled by large donations from the Conservative Party, you think?
I hope the No campaign will be as transparent about their funding and who is backing them as we intend to be.
Hey, can we clarify something you reported as saying at the Yes launch? Is it your opinion that asking 1 million Scots to sign a new declaration of independence is a mistake when that has not been spelled out, as you said, clearly enough at this stage?
Sorry, well, I'm not sure.
At the funding, you were reported at the time, this may not be the case and I just want to clarify it, but the reports at the time said that you had conceded that it was a mistake to ask 1 million Scots to sign this declaration of independence.
No, I didn't say
that is absolutely not the case.
That's absolutely not true.
No. Can we then clarify your position on whether there should be a second question, if you have a position on that?
Well, my position on that is I'm leading the Yes Scotland campaign. We'll be campaigning for independence. We will only be campaigning for independence, and that's a campaign I'm leading.
OK. What do you think has to happen before people can make up their minds here?
The main thing, I think, in Scotland at the moment is that most people are open to the discussion. I've had the interesting experience in the last 5-6 weeks where I spoke at the launch of Yes Scotland, which is the first time I've ever spoken on any political issue. And a lot of people have been in touch with me since then. Some to say, we agree with you, and some to say, well, we're not sure, we might agree with you. Let's meet for a coffee and talk about it. So I've been drinking a lot of coffee in recent weeks. But my experience completely is that people are open to the conversation and I think are highly persuadable that the arguments are very strong for an independent Scotland. So that's what we need to do over the next 2 years. Will
it be your position, though, that you put forward policy ideas?
I think people who are contributing to the debate will put forward policy ideas. I mean, I'm sure the SNP and the Greens and the SSP and the parties on the other side, I'm sure lots of people will be making policy contributions. The Yes Scotland position is we will be campaigning for a yes vote in the referendum in 2014. And it really is up, I think, to the political parties thereafter in the general election that follows 18 months later to set out their policy agenda for people in Scotland. Right.
So it was very useful to clarify that earlier point because that has been quite widely reported. So that's quite interesting about how the media is interacting with this whole thing. But you said, I hope this quote is accurate, I sincerely hope we can have a sensible and mature debate free from punch and judy confrontations. I want to run a campaign Scotland can be proud of.
Yes.
I mean, do you have a concern that it's not just winning here that matters, it's how you win because of the residue of what could be left in Scottish society in general if this isn't a decent campaign as you've described it?
Well, I think this is hugely important. I mean, a couple of journalists during the week, not BBC journalists, I should say, did invite me to make adverse comments about people in the No campaign on an on or off the record basis. And what I would say to you and everybody else is I will not be criticising individuals on the No campaign either on an on or an off the record basis. The very important thing to realise here is that the day after the referendum in 2014, and I believe people in Scotland will vote for an independent Scotland, all the people who've been involved in the No campaign immediately become citizens of the new Scotland and will be as determined as the rest of us to make Scotland the country it could be and it should be. So I think it's very important. I think everyone in Scotland, wherever they are, wants a really good, positive, constructive campaign. And one of the things I hope I will bring to this, given my own experience, is the ability to bring a lot of high-quality information to as many people as possible, so it's a very well-informed debate.
But do you think that that's what we're actually seeing now in the social media, which you want to use? Do you think that the arguments there and the sort of way they're framed is always entirely constructive?
It's not. I think because we're in the early days of social media, I'm not sure the etiquette and the ground rules have been properly sorted out by the media themselves. I'm not necessarily sure that anonymous posting on websites is a terrific idea, because it does invite people to get into quite negative territory. That's true not just in this country. I follow American politics, and if you go onto the American websites, you get much more vicious and hostile and aggressive things being said, I think, than you do here. But what people are using social media for, I think, and I've had a lot of this during the week, is it's to engage with the people in the campaign. And a lot of people have been saying to me, you know, what can I do to help? What can we do to play our part? And people actually want something concrete. So what I've said to people who are already supporting Yes is, if in the next 2 years you can convince just one other person you know from your family and friends or from your workplace who is currently not intending to vote independence, just convince one other person, and there is a clear majority in favour of an independent Scotland.
Can I ask you something about the role of the media? Do you think that do you accept that there is newspaper bias, as SNP campaigners say, and that even some papers who are pro-SNP are anti-independence? Is that going to be an issue for you in getting the message out?
Newspapers are very important in terms of creating the mood music of any campaign. But I think it's a free country. There are some newspapers who don't make any distinction between news and opinion and blur the two. There are other newspapers which observe that distinction. But it's a free press, and we'll engage with that press.
What should be the role of BBC Scotland in this? What do you think its role is at the moment?
The honest broker, as always, to provide high-quality debate, high-quality information, and I'm sure BBC Scotland will do just that. And
you're satisfied it's doing that as things exist now?
I have nothing to suggest to the contrary.
Blair Jenkins, thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you. Now, joining me now from Edinburgh is Richard Baker, one of the 5 directors of the Better Together campaign. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. First of all, can we look, Mr. Baker, at the funding issue? Can you give us any more clarity today who actually will be paying for your campaign?
Well, what we said is that at the moment, because the SNP haven't put forward the referendum bill yet, there are no rules governing donations, but we have said that despite that, we will voluntarily abide by the appropriate legislation, which is the Parties, Elections and Referendums Act, and that means that we will not be accepting foreign donations, and we'll also be publishing on our website, bettertogether.net, all donations over £7,500. So when Blair Jenkins talked about transparency in donations, I'm happy to agree with him on that, and we will maintain the same level of transparency in terms of our donations as well. OK,
so you publish who's given the large donations, but do you think there should be, like the Yes campaign, a limit on the amount people can give if they're not on the voters' roll in Scotland?
What we said is that we'll publish names of all donors above £7,500, and we'll also, of course, need to see what legislation spells out in the whole.
But you will accept money from anybody, anywhere in the UK?
Yeah, well, what we said is that we'll not accept foreign donations because we do not regard the rest of the UK as foreign donations. We're fighting to keep the UK together. 800,000 Scots live and work in the rest of the UK, so absolutely. And indeed, we look at the SNP themselves with a track record of accepting donations from overseas. I think it's surprising anybody should regard us as doing anything else.
Do you have any concerns, though, that if, as the current speculation has been, that most of the donations will come from big conservative donors in the south, do you have any concern then that the perception grows up that this is a campaign that's been bankrolled by southern interests, as opposed to the Yes campaign, which is rooted very much in donations out of Scotland?
Well, look, I mean, that is indeed, just as you say, it's speculation, and we'll be pushing. This is the start of our campaign. We had a very successful launch last week based on people living in Scottish communities, and we'll be pushing very hard for donations in Scotland.
Okay.
And so I hope we will receive a sizable donations from within Scotland.
So if we look at what the Better Together campaign is actually offering people in Scotland, if it's no to independence, what is it?
Well, clearly, it's Scotland remaining in the United Kingdom, and we'll be putting forward a very positive case of why Scotland benefits from being part of the UK in terms of our position in the world, in terms of our economy, in terms of our shared, not just history, but our shared society too. So we were putting forward that positive case about that definitively important question about whether Scotland remains in the United Kingdom. And I think it was interesting, Blair Jenkins said, he's not got a campaign here in some second question, neither do we. We have a campaign very strongly on that very clear fundamental issue about whether Scotland should remain as a member of the United Kingdom.
But if it's yes, then, economically, socially, what vision do you offer? The Yes campaign say this is what Scotland will look like in 30 years' time. What is your vision of what Scotland will look like in 30 years' time?
Well, people can see now the benefits we've had from the United Kingdom, particularly in these troubled economic times when we had the Bank of England as a bank of last resort to bail out our banks. But I have to say, when we look at the SNP or Blair Jenkins' campaign for independence, they were entirely unclear about how Scotland would look in 30 years' time. Indeed, they've been rafting back from their own support for independence the past few months, and now they say, actually, we'll keep the Bank of England, we'll keep the pound, we'll keep the monarchy, we'll even still be British. A lot of people will say, well actually, what's the point? So actually, we need far more clarity from the campaign to break up Britain about what they actually mean by that and how Scotland would look in 30 years' time.
But we have no clarity from the Better Together campaign about what increased powers, for example, you might start targeting for. There's absolutely no clarity there. And what you seem to be, without that, what do you offer?
Our campaign is about Scotland remaining in the United Kingdom.
Yes, but what I'm saying, Mr. Vickers,
over increased powers is for other forums, not for our campaign.
Just to clarify this point, though, are you saying that there isn't a specific vision you can offer? Because if you do not have a specific vision, what you are offering is staying in the UK and muddling along in managed decline. I mean, what is your positive alternative for Scotland, and when will we know the details of that and how it could be achieved?
Well, I think staying in the UK is a very positive alternative from independence, and people know what the UK means. We know the strengths of the UK, we know the challenges of the UK as well, but we know particularly its strengths at a time
so that's
of
it. It's just the status quo. It's what we've got.
Isabel, I have to say to you, you weren't asking Blair Jenkins to define his vision of independence, and there are huge unanswered questions about what independence actually means. In fact, the SNP have been changing their view week in, week out what independence means. You didn't ask Blair Jenkins, for example, whether he believes Scotland should remain in or out of NATO, a fundamental question which the SNP are at war about internally. So to suggest that we have got a lack of clarity of vision, which the SNP and those who wish to break up Britain do, is simply, with respect, absolute nonsense. And when we come to a second question, it should be quite clear. It's a fundamental issue in which, until recently, all the main parties were agreed. It should be a clear, single question on whether Scotland should be in or out of the UK. The reason Alex Salmond is changing his mind on that is because he knows he's not going to get the answer he wants from the first question. And so people will now be asking, including, I believe, in his own party, why he's running chicken from the clear debate we should have in this country over the future of Scotland. And I want to engage in that debate, and I think Blair Jenkins was looking to engage in that debate constructively as well.
Well, I want to ask you about that in a moment, but just for the avoidance of doubt here, Blair Jenkins' job is not to articulate specific policy areas, as you've just suggested, and he made that very clear in the interview. He will not be promoting specific policies, because the policies in the independence grouping, the parties who support them, they could have different policies. His job is to put forward an argument for an independent Scotland, not policy specifics, so there is no point in asking him policy specifics. But what he has said is he wants an end to punch and judy politics. Is that going to be possible, do you think?
What we'll be doing is putting forward a positive case for why we should be in the United Kingdom. And I think it will be possible to get to the meat of the debate once we move beyond process questions, once we move on to having a clear debate over the future of Scotland. And I hope we can move on to that real debate as quickly as possible. And look, Isabel, we will be putting forward a positive case for Scotland remaining in the United Kingdom. We'll be arguing that England, Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, we all benefit from being part of the UK in terms of our economy, in terms of our society, in terms of our position in the world. So I do think we'll have a substantial debate, and I hope that on the media we're allowed to have a substantial debate as well.
Richard Baker, thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you.